Okay, I wanted to dedicate this to Sylvester Francis and to Big Chief Tootie Montana, Chief of Chiefs. This is a poem I wrote for my Big Chief, who I followed for about 36 years, Bo Dallas, the Wild Magnolias. I first got interested in coming to New Orleans when I got their album on Polydor, the Wild Magnolias. And then I came to see what this was about, and I went out with them, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. And so I started coming every year, and then I moved to New Orleans. Anyway, I wrote this. My Big Chief was passing away slowly, and I wanted to express these things, and I wanted to show where I thought all this was coming from as an advocate. You dig? We love Big Chief. 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 He's our Big Chief. He's our Big Chief. We love Big Chief. We love Big Chief. Out of the cradle of American civilization as we know it, after the white people exterminated the Indian nations, after they stole the lands of the native peoples and forced them into the concentration camps that were called reservations, after the Trail of Tears, after they were stripped of their language, their gods, and the brilliant culture the native peoples had devised over centuries and centuries and many centuries. And the heroic exploits and the entire history of the native peoples were erased from public memory. After the white people brought their slaves from West Africa or Haiti or the markets of Charleston or New Orleans and herded them onto the plantations and worked them like mules from dawn to dark. After the 300 years of slavery, after the white people took everything for themselves and kept it to themselves, after the years and years and years of oppression and economic exploitation and the repression of the spirit and culture of the people, after the millions of Americans of African descent were denied the right to work, the right to vote, the right to a proper education, the right to equal opportunity guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, the right to share in the immense wealth their ancestors had generated for the white people. After emancipation, after segregation and racial discrimination became the law of the land, after the blues were born in Louisiana and Arkansas and Texas and Mississippi, after jazz emerged in the back streets and bar rooms of New Orleans, after the Jazz Age, after the Harlem Renaissance, after Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and W.C. Handy, Noble Sissle and Eubie Blake, after the fusion of rhythm and blues in Kansas City and Los Angeles and New Orleans, after Professor Longhair, after Roy Brown, after Smiley Lewis, after Dave Bartholomew and Tommy Ridgely and Fats Domino, after Little Richard, after Rosa Parks would not be moved to the back of the bus in Alabama, after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Robert F. Williams, Stokely Carmichael and Rap Brown, after the heroic heroic struggle for freedom led by the students and workers who taught the people how to resist. After the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, after the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, after the Civil Rights Movement, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, after the riots in Watts and Newark and Detroit and all over the country, after the Democratic National Convention, after the Festival of Life was tear gassed and smashed, after the vicious prosecution of the Chicago 8, after the massive demonstrations against the war in Vietnam, and the escalations, and the escalations, and the escalations by the American warmongers, after the murder of Fred Hampton, after the massacres of students by police and National Guards in People's Park in Berkeley, and Kent State University, and Jackson State University, after Woodstock, after Altamont, after the deaths of Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison and blind Al Wilson, after the ascendance of Ray Charles and James Brown and Aretha Franklin and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, after the triumph of soul music and in New Orleans, after Mr. Danny Barker returned to his hometown to lead the brass bands back out into the streets, after the wild Indians of the Mardi Gras Indian Nation had been masking for more than 100 years to honor the Native Americans and their incredible bravery and fierce resistance and their active assistance to the African peoples held in slavery by their common oppressor. After Big Chief Tootie Montana trumpeted this change from violence in the streets to the challenge of beauty in costume and dance and song with his magnificent Indian suits for the yellow Pocahontas. After 100 years of Mardi Gras Indian music in the streets and the shout to the Big Chiefs and the cries of the Spy Boys and the Flag Boys and the crazy, crazy wild men and the pretty big queens, after the bass drums and the tom-toms, after the cowbells and tambourines and the chanting of the second line, dancing in the streets behind the wild Indians and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. After Giacomo by Sugar Boy and the Cane Cutters, and Indian Red by the Creole Cats, and Iko Iko by the Dixie Cups, and Pass the Hatchet by Eddie Bo and the Gypsies. Out of all this, out of all this, out of all the years of struggle, out of the streets of New Orleans, out of the Third Ward, out of the Magnolia Projects, out of the destruction and despair surrounding him, out of the ugliness and terror of modern life in Central City and the streets of America's cities, out of the Third Ward, out of his mother's house at 1960 Jackson Avenue on Mardi Gras Day and St. Joseph's Night. Big Chief Bo Dollars, Big Chief of the Wild Magnolias, pretty, pretty Big Chief of the Wild Magnolias, mighty singer of Indian songs and powerful composer of Mardi Gras Indian anthems. I'm talking about Big Chief, mighty Big Chief. He's our Big Chief. We love Big Chief. He's the pretty Big Chief with the golden crown. Indians coming, gonna take him down. We're going way downtown on the overpass. Get the cars out the way. Let the Big Chief pass. Big Chief coming, Unande. Mighty Cootie Fire on the Mardi Gras Day. Golden Eagles, Big Chief Monk Boudreaux. Golden Arrows, Big Chief Peppy. Creole Wild West, Big Chief Howard and Little Walter. Mighty Black Eagles, Big Chief Pete and Big Chief Roddy. Young sons of Geronimo, Little Red, White, and Blue. Carrollton Hunters, Wild Squatulies, Black Feathers, Big Chief Lionel. White Cloud Hunters, Big Chief Little Charles. Golden Comanches, Big Chief Juan Pardo. Big Chief Alfred Doucette, Big Chief Smiley Ricks. Spirit of Fire, Big Chief Victor Harris. Congo Nation, Big Chief Donald Harrison. Guardians of the Flame, Big Chief Donald Harrison Sr. Wild Tapatuas, Big Chief Jolly. Big Chief Jake of the Mighty White Eagles. Big Chief Brother Tillman and Matt, the spy boy of the nation. Indians of the nation, the whole wild creation. Bow down on that dirty ground. Big Chief make no hoomba. He will not kneel. Mighty Big Chief got a heart of steel. Indians coming, two-way pack away. Wild Magnolia's coming, get the hell out the way. Two-way, out the way. Big Chief coming, two-way pack away. Big Chief Bo Dollars, Wild Magnolias. In the streets of the Third Ward, from Second and Dryads, and all over the city. Gonna take them down. Wild Indians on stage. The first ever jazz fest all over the world. Wild Magnolias, Golden Eagles in the recording studio with Willie T and the New Orleans Project with Snooks Eklund and Uganda Roberts and Bruce Farmer and Larry Panna and the African cowboy, Mr. Earl Turmington. Yeah, the first Indian funk recordings on albums like Wild Magnolias. They call us wild. I'm back at carnival time. Mardi Gras Indian Showdown. Life is a carnival. 1313 Hoodoo Street. 30 years and still wild. Voice of immense power. Costumes of sheer brilliance and eye-popping beauty. Songs of wild Indian lore, like every year at carnival time, we make a new suit. Big Chief like plenty of firewater. Smoke my peace pipe, smoke it right. Big Chief Bo Dollars, Wild Magnolia. He's our Big Chief. We love 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 Big Chief. Yeah, I'm like Victor Hare says, my Big Chief is gonna live forever.